Tension running high in Kosovo as Serb leaders there refuse NATO's demand to remove roadblocks in the north of the country. Just what does it all mean in this already volatile region? And what does it take for a newly independent Kosovo to assert its power? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Seeker. Ethnic tensions in Kosovo are nothing new, even after the majority Albanian territory declared independence from Serbia 3 years ago. But the allegiance of its ethnic Serbian population, most of whom live in northern Kosovo, still lies with Belgrade. In July of this year, Serb residents blockaded roads leading to the north in an attempt to stop Kosovo forces from controlling border crossings there. The NATO peacekeeping force in the country, KFOR, had given the Serbs until Wednesday to remove the roadblocks. That deadline came with word from the Serb leaders being that they would not comply with KFOR's request for unconditional access. Well, Kosovo's Prime Minister spoke about the blockaded roads. Here's what he had to say.
KFOR and ULEX are cooperating well. They have the full support of the Kosovo government. It's in our common interest that the rule of law is applied to the whole territory of Kosovo, that there is freedom of movement at all territories of Kosovo, that people and goods are moving freely, and that we build a democratic environment for people's lives here. We want to build a better Kosovo for all citizens of this place, no matter what nationality they are. These actions are coordinated between the international community and the government of Kosovo.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined by our guest from Mitrovica, Oliver Ivanovic, Secretary for the Ministry for Kosovo and Metohija in the government of Serbia there. From London, Michael Binyon joins us. He is an editorial writer and foreign affairs specialist for the Times of London. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us. Oliver Ivanovic, if I could start with you. Now, what's behind this decision to not grant the troops there, the KFOR troops there, unconditional access and this blockade? And what good do you think it will really do in the long term?
First of all, I have to say that there will not be unconditional, freedom of movement. There is a couple of conditions which are very clear from the Serb side. First thing is the KFOR should provide us with insurance, with the guarantees that if in the future no armed forces will come to the north unless the political decision is made before. The second is that the KFOR will not transport the custom officers and the border police, before the agreement is reached in the Brussels. These are the conditions which we put in front of the KFOR, and I think that these conditions have to be fulfilled before.
And is that because you don't trust the Kosovo authorities to do their job?
First of all, the Serbian people, doesn't matter where they are living, but in particular those living in the north, do not recognize independence of Kosovo. Serbia is neither, but that's exactly something what have to be taken in a consideration. We do not recognize independence of Kosovo. Any steps taken that way, to prove the independence in the north will be exactly facing a resistance from the local people.
You put KFOR in a very difficult position here, haven't you? Because if they won't, they won't want to do anything that might raise the very real ethnic tensions in Kosovo at the moment. But at the same time, they may be forced to lift this blockade by force. What good is that really going to do in the long term?
First of all, the KFOR put themselves in a bad position because they took the side in the 25th of July. They simply assist the Kosovo security forces, armed forces, to go to the north where the 95 or 96% of the Serbs, of the people exactly are the Serbs, and they do not trust the
They're enforcing internationally mandated requirements.
That's not the truth. They are not enforcing the international mandate. His mandate is to provide everyone in Kosovo with the security feeling. But they are doing that just now for the Albanians by assisting his armed forces to come to the north.
Michael Binyon, if I could turn to you on this. What do you make of this latest position from the Serbian government in northern Kosovo? Is it something that is sustainable?
Well, it's going to be sustained as long as they continue to man the barricades, because I think KFOR would be reluctant to go in with a full fighting force and remove them in the face of shooting or armed opposition. But I think in the long term, no, it's not sustainable, because the barricades are simply an attempt to cut off this enclave from the outside world. Of course, is open access to Serbia, and the real problem is the attempt to close that border between Serbia and northern Kosovo, which the Kosovan government wants to close in retaliation for Serbs in Serbia saying they do not want open trade across to Kosovo, which they do not recognize as a separate and independent state. It all goes back really to the 2008 agreement to recognize Kosovo as a separate state. 70 countries have recognized it, but Serbia, of course, adamantly refuses to see this part of its former territory as anything separate.
Oliver Ivanovic, I mean, your Serb leaders in northern Kosovo appear to be going against the tide here, in that more than 80 nations have now recognized the independence of Kosovo, and that is a number that is only going to continue to go up. And how long as well can you rely on the support of Belgrade in your efforts here?
Well, first of all, I have to say that we are aware about of importance of these countries which did recognize, but neither the UN recognized, nor the EU, European Union recognized, nor the NATO recognized Kosovo independence. Due to that, they are supposed to be neutral. That his forces and his missions in Kosovo have to be status neutral. As long as they are status neutral, we the Serbs have no problem with that. The Belgrade suddenly, our government and the single government we trust, have his own position, which is very clear, that the Serbia do not recognize independence of Kosovo. But that's not simply a sentence which we are repeating. That something is putting some obligation on all of us. By not recognizing, we are allowed, when we are, let's say, committing ourselves to do whatever is needed to prevent the Kosovo independence to happen.
But how much longer can you continue to rely on Belgrade to back you up when the government there is clearly dealing with its own pressures from the European Union to work more closely with the Kosovo government in Pristina and to eventually recognize it as a state?
First of all, I have to say, by saying we do not recognize what the Serbian government said many times, that's putting in front of the Serbian government some obligation to take care about the population which is exactly recognized in Serbia like his own capital and his own country. That means Serbia cannot afford to cut the support for those people here. Simply that's against our constitution. Due to that, I think that Serbia will never change their mind. There will be some maybe reduction, but due to our poor economical situation, but not more than that.
Michael Binion, the government in Belgrade is in a position here where they are still pushing themselves as a candidate for EU membership. If they are going to fulfill those obligations with the EU, what are they eventually going to have to do?
Well, they are going to have to come to some accommodation with Kosovo. It may fall short of full recognition of independence. I think the European Union understands the very great pressures from northern Kosovo, from the Serb population, and also the pressures within Serbia, who feel that the Kosovo territory is a historic part of Serbia, and that this would be almost impossible for them to recognize it as a separate state. Nevertheless, they will have to come to some accommodation, some modus vivendi. It's absolutely true, as you said, that Serbia at the moment is working closely with the European Union to try to put in an application for full membership. And they've already fulfilled a number of those conditions, the most important being the arrest of Ratko Mladic, the Bosnian Serb general who was responsible for the massacre at Srebrenica. That was a very big step forward, and I think Brussels would like to see Serbia continuing the dialogue towards membership, so they will be trying to help Serbia find a way around this roadblock in Kosovo if they can.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that right now because, as I said, Serbia has long-term plans to enter the European Union, but Kosovo remains the sticking point. Now, the Council of Ministers, the EU's main decision-making body, is expected to approve Serbia's candidacy status in December. While Serbia has been praised for reforms and for handing over indicted war crimes figure Ratko Mladic, the EU as a group supports Kosovo's independence from Serbia. Without a political solution there, Serbia is unlikely to be welcomed into the European Union for a long time. Michael Binion, if I could turn back to you. You mentioned that the issue of Ratko Mladic and the Serbian authorities had handed him over to the War Crimes Tribunal there. Will they they obviously felt that they had reached a major hurdle there. But will they feel that there will always be this Kosovo hurdle in front of them as far as their accession to the EU?
I think this will be a major obstacle, yes, certainly. Tensions have been going down gradually in the 3 years since Kosovo declared independence. It's true that 80 people, well, almost 80 states have recognized it as a separate entity. The EU and NATO may not have recognized it formally as a body, but de facto, all of them recognize that as a separate entity. Indeed, NATO forces are committed to protecting what they see as the independence of Kosovo from any possible Serb interference or interference from Serbia. So that is a done deal, even if major states such as Russia do not agree with that deal. The fact is, though, that Serbia will have to find some way of working out a way of living with Kosovo. Otherwise, I find it very difficult to see how they could become full members of the European Union when every other state there is ready to recognize Kosovo.
Oliver Ivanovic, many people say, and I suspect you agree with this, but that the biggest mistake was to recognize Kosovo as a state because, and I'm not sure if you agree with this, it does not have the institutions that a state has. And there is a lot of criticism of Kosovo that it's the center of an organized crime ring. What's your reaction to that?
Organized crime is something what is linked with the power, with the government, and suddenly the head of the organized crime octopus is in Pristina. I will not suddenly deny there are some criminals even in the north, but it is such unimportant that's not deserved to speak about that. I would just like to comment something what my honorable interlocutor said just previously. That the membership of the Kosovo in the international institutions rely on, first of all, on the membership in the UN. But to my knowledge, I do not see any sign that Russia, China, and suddenly, first of all, Serbia will change their mind toward the Kosovo independency. Due to that, there is no bright future for Kosovo. Simply, we have to agree what the Kosovo status is, because what we have right now is something what is temporary solution. For the final solution, we have to have new round of talks, new round of negotiations, and finally we will maybe have the solution which could be acceptable for the both sides.
What if the Serbian government in Belgrade were to move towards some closer ties with Kosovo in various areas such as communication, energy, and so on, closer ties on that level, short of complete recognition of independence? Is that something that Serbs in Kosovo could live with?
I think that we have to find the way of communication, because simply this problem deserves to be treated in a much better and let's say permanent way. And the whole Serbian government, not just this one which is existing in Belgrade and Pristina, but even the future, in the future they have to talk to each other somehow. But the recognition is something else. And it seems to me there is no even small space, for maneuver for those who think that Kosovo is independent among the Serbian political elite. All of them are supposed to respect and to obey the Serbian constitution, what means they have to strongly disagree with the Kosovo independency in every possible way. That means talking about technical issue, that's one thing, but talking about high-level political issue, that is something what we have to have at a certain moment. When that depends very much on the two political elites. When they will be able, ready, with a strong political will, but also to have strong political back from the opposition on both sides.
Michael Binion, is part of the problem here that the government in Pristina is basically, if I can put it bluntly, weak and is far too reliant on foreign aid and foreign help to enforce itself?
It is a weak government, and as you say, it does have a number of problems. There are question marks over the records of some of the members of the government. There have been a number of possible scandals over, well, all sorts of things. Smuggling for one thing, drug trading for another thing. The fact that the government isn't able to enforce its will in the area of law and order, for a start. It isn't a very easily manageable territory. It's not got economic strength. It's in a very weak position and does rely largely on the security offered by the international forces there on KFOR. Of course, over-reliance on KFOR means that it will probably never develop its own capacity to patrol its own defense and its own borders effectively. And that is one of the problems. KFOR, the NATO forces, for its part, would like to get out of Kosovo really as soon as possible, because it costs a great deal of money and people feel this situation could go on and on indefinitely, rather like the division of Cyprus, where international troops have been there for almost 40 years.
Oliver Ivanovich, you want to respond to some of that?
Yes, the Cyprus is not such a bad example, to be honest, because, you know, since long time ago we have the problem with Cyprus, but the Cyprus is just right these days, might be much closer to be resolved. And just by the way, the Cyprus problem is much more easier than the Kosovo problem is. In this problem, I'm just hoping that Cyprus model could be applied in the Serbian issue when the Serbia get closer to the EU. I'm not so sure that EU can afford to reject the Serbia, you know, from the membership. At the moment, the Serbia achieved all the necessary Copenhagen criteria. If that happened, I guess that the EU will have the strong interest to have the Serbia inside of the EU, because that's the single way to keep in political stability whole region. If the Serbia is not stabilized, there is no stability in the Western Balkan. If there is no stability in the Western Balkan, I doubt that Europe can be stabilized.
Michael Binion, I know we mentioned this at the top of the program, but what is it ultimately going to take for Kosovo, after 3 years as a nominally independent state recognized by about 80 countries in the world? What is it going to take for them to ultimately assert their power?
Well, I do think they have to come to an accommodation with the Serb minority themselves. The fact is, although the Serb minority does not recognize independence, equally the government in Pristina has been pretty hostile to the Serb minority. They still see them as enemies to some extent. They see them as people who should have gone back to Serbia. They should have left Kosovo after the end of the war there. And I think they have treated them very much as enemies within their own territory. They need to be more accommodating to the fears and worries of the Serb minority. Equally, the Serb minority has to recognize that they are living in a state that is actually now an ethnic Albanian majority, a very large majority, and they have to try to see a way of participating in the affairs of Kosovo itself by taking part in votes, by standing for election, and by treating themselves as a minority with protection and with rights. Neither side is yet prepared to recognize the rights of the other side, and that's one of the problems.
Is that a fair comment, Oliver Ivanovich?
Yeah, we have no problem to live with Albanian majority as long as that is a part of Serbia. Otherwise, we have no legal and political security and certainty for our future. And independence is something what we do not recognize in the same way how the Albanians didn't want to live with Serbia, you know, in the recent past. And that's why they declare the independence in the unilateral way. But I think that we have to sit once again and discuss all this issue, because the Ahtisaari is obviously not producing enough good frame for the both sides.
Michael Binion, is part of the problem here perhaps that obviously Europe is dealing with a number of problems right now throughout the continent, mainly economic, the ongoing debt problems with Greece and so on, and perhaps what is happening in the Balkans right now is quite low on the to-do list, but is that part of the problem here, that if they perhaps took a more active role in resolving this issue, then we wouldn't have this problem?
Well, you're absolutely right. That is indeed part of the problem, that it's very difficult to handle 3 or 4 major crises all at the same time, particularly when other issues are much more urgent at the moment. As you say, the problem of how to solve the debt crisis, what to do about the future of the euro, what to do about helping Greece, all that is of much greater urgency and significance. And as long as there's not actual fighting in the Balkans, as long as there is simply a standoff or simply tension, I don't think the major capitals of Europe are going to turn their attention down to the Balkans, the Western Balkans, and stability in that region. My interlocutor is absolutely right. Of course, it is important to bring Serbia into the European Union, and I think everybody would like to see Serbia as a member. It is an important state. It's at the center of the region, and a center that is feeling disaffected and unstable is not going to provide regional security. And as long as there is no security there, these tensions could blow up again at any moment. I think it would be useful if Europe did give a little bit more muscle to those responsible for trying to find some negotiated solution at the moment. But as you said, quite rightly, there's too much on their plate elsewhere.
Oliver Ivanovic, would you welcome more European mediation in resolving this?
To be honest, we are much more let's say, the keen to have the UN in this position, because we feel much more secure in a political sense of the word when we have the Security Council with a couple of big countries, main power in the world, with a veto right. And suddenly the Russia's position in that case is something what we consider very useful, and it's helping very much for the Serbia to bring again in agenda this issue. The EU is something what is our strategic interest, but if the EU membership is conditionalized with recognition of the Kosovo independency, many people will say no. And in this case, I think that there is another issue which we have to have in a consideration. That's some kind of the tiredness, and you know, the many countries and many European countries are fed up with the Kosovo, and they want to walk out. They have his own problem, but it's, I'm sorry to say, but they are you know, rushing with the decision what the Kosovo is supposed to be, and now they are rushing to walk out. But that's not the way to solve the problem, because the Kosovo problem is not solved yet.
The sense I'm getting from your answer is that this comes down to trust issues, and the suggestion from what you're saying is that you trust countries like Russia and entities like the United Nations a lot more than you trust the European Union right now. Is that fair to say?
It's not that we do not trust the EU, but by the fact that the EU seems to all of us is very difficult to agree on a certain issue. And suddenly these most powerful countries did recognize we have some kind of the prejudice, let's say, and we have suddenly even some proof that those countries are leading EU toward the recognition. But thanks God we have 5 countries which they didn't recognize among the 27 members, and that is something what we are keeping like a strong tool, but it's not necessarily so strong, because unfortunately these 5 countries which they didn't recognize are not so powerful among the EU countries.
Just in the couple of minutes or so that we have left, Michael Binion, how do you see this playing out over the coming days and weeks? Do you fear that ethnic tensions could flare up further, or do you ultimately see some form of compromise in the works here?
Well, these tensions have flared up several times before, and KFOR is quite practiced in keeping patient and trying very painstakingly and with great difficulty to negotiate some kind of compromise. I think the compromise deal that's on offer at the moment is that the border crossings could be patrolled by NATO itself, and even if the Serbs do set some kind of conditions, it may be that the KFOR force would accept some of those conditions in order to reduce the levels of tension on the border, and thereby reduce the general new round of tension that seems to have flared up over this issue. As I say, it's not the first time we've had trouble. There has been shooting between the two sides in the past several times, and we've had a confrontation between Serbs and Albanians several times in the past few years. I'm not particularly optimistic about the long term. I think this is still going to be a matter for a long course of haggling and wrangling, but in the short term I think they will find a way around this particular problem.
All right, we were going to have to leave it there on that hopeful note. Thanks for watching. I want to thank both of our guests for taking part, Oliver Ivanovic in Mitrovica and Michael Binion in London. And just before we go, a reminder that you can also join in the conversation by emailing us with your comments and suggestions at insidestory@aljazeera.com. The latest news is up next. Bye for now.